purpose of this video is to give you a practical approach to repeating the California bar examination. To my way of thinking, there are four major aspects to take into account: law knowledge, test-taking skills, the physical and emotional aspects of preparing, and luck. That's an aspect most people in the bar review business don't talk about, but I'll spend a minute or two on it. The first thing that we need to do is evaluate your score sheet. The first thing I do when I meet with an applicant who has failed the California bar exam is I evaluate their score sheet. The first thing I look at is the overall score, just to find out how close the applicant came to passing. During my many years in this field, I've encountered more than one California bar applicant who failed the California bar by less than 1 point. Well, obviously, a person in that category is in a very different situation from someone who failed the bar by 300 or 400 points. So the first thing we do is we look at the overall score to see just how close the candidate came. In particular, we pay attention to the raw scores. In my way of thinking, a raw MBE score of 120 or better is pretty close to passing. By and large, the average raw score required to pass the MBE is about 130. I've seen it as high as 134 or 135, and I've seen it as low as the low 120s. But I think 130, 65%, is a reasonable score to consider as a passing score. So if you scored close to that, usually more practice will suffice. But if you scored substantially less than that, the problem may be a little bit more complicated. Now, one also obviously wants to pay close attention to the written score. Typically, a written score will more or less track the multi-state. But sometimes a candidate will do drastically worse on one part of the bar than on another. And obviously, a question that one has to ask is, why is that? And commonly it will be either because the candidate is just more talented at one area than the other, or, and I think this is the more frequent reason, the candidate spent a lot more time practicing one part of the bar than the other. Next, let's consider how to evaluate your previous effort to prepare for the bar exam. After I look at a candidate's score sheet, the next thing I do is I interview them about their previous preparation efforts. Now, you know, I think the most common mistake is to study too much and not practice enough. So obviously, the first thing I ask any candidate who has failed the bar is, how much practice did you do? And I'll tell you what, if the student tells me that he or she did fewer than 1,000 multi-state questions, my judgment is that student simply did not take the exam seriously enough. You've got to practice heavily in order to pass this exam. Now, is it true that some people are able to jive their way through the bar doing very little practice? I suppose it is true. But the smart way to proceed is to do a high level of practice. And if you've already failed the bar without doing what I consider to be substantial practice, that's my prescription for you next time around. Now, with regard to the essays, I would have to say that in my experience, candidates typically are better prepared for the multi-state than they are for the essays. And the most common thing I hear from students when they defend their failure to do very much written practice is, Scott, I didn't have time to practice because I was too busy studying. And I smile at that student and I explain to them that their key to success is to learn the law by engaging in as high a volume of written practice as possible. Fortunately, the Master Essay Method program gives anybody a chance to do a lot more essay questions than most of us have time to study between now and the bar exam. The physical and emotional aspects of preparing for and taking any bar exam are crucial. And I think that people don't spend enough time specifically thinking about them and preparing to be strong physically and strong emotionally as they prepare for and particularly on the crucial days of the bar examination. In my experience, it's very common for candidates to work too hard overall in their preparation for the exam, with the consequence being, during the exam itself, they are worn out to do their very best. Now, my personal opinion, as you well know, is that the most common mistake is to study too much and not practice enough. But I'll tell you what, the second most common mistake is to work too hard overall at the expense of your physical and emotional health. Now, one thing I tell everybody that I work with is they would be wise to be in better physical shape on the first day of the exam than they are on the first day of their preparation for the exam. And I say that even to people who already are athletes. Now, please don't get me wrong. I am not telling you that this is the time for you to give up all of your bad habits, for you to live a Spartan, unhappy existence. I'm telling you that a key to success is living a balanced, sensible existence. And that means being very careful about your schedule, budgeting your time, and making sure you've got time to eat well, to work out, to cook well if you enjoy cooking, and to really feel your best. Now, personally, I think your actual hard practice should end about a week before the exam, and that the last week before you actually take the test should be devoted to memorization, because short-term memory actually counts for something at that point, a week before the exam, and also towards nurturing your physical and emotional health, so that during the actual hours of the exam, you feel your strongest, smartest, and best. Most people in the bar exam business don't spend much time talking about luck. But I do think it's worth acknowledging that luck does play a role in your success on the bar examination. So, as you look back over your preparation for a failed effort on the exam, I think it's worth asking the question, were you the victim of bad luck? If you had a parent, a spouse, or a pet die a few days before the exam, I think you can be forgiven if you don't do so well on the test. Similarly, anything that disrupted your life badly is a reason why you might not have performed to your best on any given exam, the bar exam or a final exam. So, as you prepare for the next bar exam, it's wise to take that into account. I also think it's wise to remember the fact that we tend to make our luck, and that the better we plan and the better we stick to our plans, the more likely it is that other things will break in our direction as well. I've already said 2 or 3 times in this video that the most common mistake is to study too much and not practice enough. I've also said the second most common mistake is to work too hard overall. So, as you prepare for the next bar exam, I strongly advise you to start off by having a look at the calendar. Start at the bar exam and work backwards. Then, allocate the amount of time that you really have to prepare according to where the points are. Obviously, you should focus on the multi-state subjects, both by practicing multi-state questions and by practicing essay writing. You should study the law that you demonstrate a lack of knowledge of via practice. So, in other words, let your practice fuel your study. And make sure that you carefully study the material that you don't know very well. And try to stay away from studying material that you already know very well. I'm available to consult with you as you set up your preparation, and I can guide your preparation as well. You can find out about my master essay method and micro review at passthebar.com or calbarexam.com. Good luck on the exam, and good luck in your future legal practice.